And yeah, you mentioned kind of becoming a bass player as well. Like reading a little bit about you, you ended up, you find yourself in Austin, and you kind of became a really sought after bass player in Austin. Is that kind of how the Delbert McClinton opportunity came to be?
Yeah, and it didn't feel so sought after, but that time, a particular time, and I was probably playing with 3 or 4 different types of bands,
Yeah.
everything from a cover country band to Leroy Parnell to, eventually Bill Carter out of Delbert McClinton. But what happened was the turning point for me as far as just a straight bass player musician. My dad had Reese Wyman come over to our studio, as well as a handful of these world class players living down the road in Austin. Our studio was in Lampasas. So my dad would be cutting jingles or maybe a project on someone or cutting songs he had been writing. And we had Ernie Durawa, who was a friend of my dad's, a drummer from the Texas Tornadoes. He was kind of our session drummer, and I think maybe he suggested Reese. Reese came over. We loved him. He was so good. And for people that don't know, Reese went on to play with Stevie Ray Vaughan. He was
Hmm.
playing with Delbert McClinton when I met him,
Hmm.
and then plays with Joe Bonamassa now. But a phenomenal player. I'm talking 35, 40 years ago almost. That's shocking, but it's true. And Reese got to know me through these sessions, and he's like, "Man, I think I have a gig for you in Austin." And he saved me. It was the Hyatt Regency cocktail gig from 5 to 9, like 6 nights a week, Chris. And it was Ernie, it was Reese, it was a full band fiddle, Howard Kalish, I believe is his name, and
Wow.
we had a lead singer, and I'll think of his name in just a minute. I'm sorry, but anyway, it was great. And Reese was starting to suggest songs I should learn in some cool Rodney Crowell things that I already kind of knew, but I loved that he was. Then he created a band called the C Notes, and I was the lead singer.
Wow.
And it was Delbert's band featuring me as the lead singer guy. It was demanding. Oh my gosh, we played a wide range and variety of music, and from Marvin Gaye to original stuff, and it was crazy, but it was so good.
Yeah, talk about
Joseph,
that. The progression of going from bass player to front man. That's a completely different animal.
absolutely. My dad was. I grew up around frontmen. My dad was the frontman. My high school band already had a lead singer,
Right.
so I didn't do much singing at all. I was a harmony guy, and that's about. Or I'd get featured, like even with Delbert, he would take a break and feature me on a song. And our keyboard player Mike Duke, who was phenomenal at the time, and those kind of things. I would maybe have a little spotlight number, but I wasn't fronting a band, even though people were trying to get me to sort of lean in that direction, including my grandfather. He wanted to see me go on and be my dad.
Hmm.
And but I just wasn't ready. That was a lot of responsibility and gear and travel, and I saw the people struggling with it. And there was no Texas chart back then. There was no Texas radio. You just
And no
struggled as a band.
infrastructure yet. Yeah. Yeah.
Not a hint of it, or I would have changed the whole course of probably what I was doing. Instead, I started trying to go to Nashville,
I
because
was
I
just
wanted
gonna say, in
to.
'89, you left Austin for Nashville, and my question, it was a three-letter question, why? But it was because of that lack of infrastructure, was it?
That was a big part of it, and my burning desire to try and get a song cut by one of my heroes, or
Yeah.
anyone, from Steve Wariner to Hank Jr. or whatever,
Hmm.
but really George Strait was on our radar because I'm a classic country kind of guy, and
Hmm.
don't what we were writing with Bill and Ruth had a little hint of some blues, Texas blues kind of vibe to it, which was really cool, which really made our songs different. Once I
Yep.
finally left Delbert, I met Bill. Bill was putting a band together to go on tour with Stevie Ray Vaughan. I auditioned, got the gig. We toured with Stevie all the way to New York
Wow.
City and back. And Bill and I rode the bus with Stevie for 2 days because we got out of the van. I just lucked out. They invited Bill and said, "Bring somebody with you." So he picked me.
Wow.
So I got out of the van and we rode with Stevie, and it was like a dream. It was still like a dream
So
because
that
I was
means
such
you
a fan.
probably had one of those topless Polaroids of Bill, huh? And you were just blackmailing him.
Yeah, really. Bill was so sweet. I just met him rehearsing. Then I got to know him on the road, but I didn't know him. And then his wife Ruth came out, and we just hit it off. We got
Mm.
in the hotel room in New York, and I played him some country homemade demos I was making from my bedroom, playing bass, guitar, program. Oh, so average, but with that being said, they heard something they liked, and they're like, "Man, we get off this tour. Let's write some country songs for you." And I went, "Man, that would be great." So I met them at their house. We started writing "Can I Count on You," "Same Old Star." All that first McBride Night album came
Mhm.
from Bill and Ruth, songs that we were just. Then we would go to Arlen Studios, which is a phenomenal studio. Gary Clark, there's still a lot of Miranda. I
Mhm.
saw she just cut her project there. It's been around forever. Eric Johnson used to have a little studio around the corner. It was a great compound there in Austin. And we were cutting our demos there with really interesting Austin people. Stephen Bruton, for one, was our friend and great guitar player back in the day. And just a whole cast of characters from Austin, but it made for a really groovy, different sounding country songs, you know?
Yeah, I love where you're just feeding me right into my outline. This is good stuff, man. So, so man, you talk about the lack of infrastructure in Texas at that time. Obviously, it exists here now, but and you talked about being kind of a classic country writer, wanting to kind of flesh that out, maybe have some of those songs, you know, cut by your heroes, people that are known for that sound. But
Right.
you have that Texas edge to your sound. Whether it's blues or southern rock or whatever it is. And it just so happens around that same time, late 80s, early 90s, when you head to Nashville, that's when country music kind of started shifting away from the classic country and more into having more crossover kind of appeal to different genres, that edge. So do you feel like that was a huge benefit to you when you arrived in town with that Texas edge to you?
Well, that and Tony Brown happened to be just the right person at the right time.
Yeah.
Um, and being connected and associated with Bill and Ruth, it was such a plus. They just had a cool vibe about them and quite a reputation already as strong, cool songwriters with the Stevie Ray stuff and the Fabulous Thunderbirds. They were getting all kinds of cool things were happening to them. And I just happened to ride that little bit of wave. They used me as sort of, here's a little project. Let's see what we can do with this guy. And then it became more than a project. We wrote so many songs, and we liked each other. So a friendship. I just saw Bill. I went back to Texas for the Texas Songwriter Hall of Fame. I
Mm-hmm.
played around that night with Drew Womack and Radney Foster, which was fantastic. And then the next day, I got up and I went and wrote and hung out with Bill Carter. Um, Sadly, his wife Ruth passed away last year,
Oh
but
man.
it was just so great to connect with him. And yeah, Ruth just can't do a whole story just on those two. And Bill gave me a copy of his book. He has a really cool book. Anyway, just an interesting guy. They took me in. They just there was no guarantee anything would ever come from other than just us hanging out and writing a song or two, you know?
Yeah.
But it got serious because the songs got so good right off the bat. Can I Count on You? It's so simple, three chords, and the truth kind of song. It just connected in a way that you can't stop once a song connects with somebody, and it continues to connect. So it was a slow climbing little single for us, but it was our first hit, and it's still the most popular stream song probably if you want to break it down to that. It's the simplest song we have and the first single we ever released. But
There was just there was
and that
just so
started.
many Texas artists at that time that were having some success in Nashville, whether it was you or
There were
Daryl Dodd, Pat Green. There was just so many that were doing well, and I feel like it might have.
Leroy,
Yeah,
Hal
Leroy.
Ketch,
Yeah,
Hal Ketchum.
the Beaumont guys, all the
Oh,
yeah, like and like I feel like it
half of the
was that.
CMA roster.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like it was that edge, right? That Texas edge and the way country music was kind of shifting a little bit at that time really helped the Texas artists out with, mainstream wise at that time. And that's why 90s country was awesome. I'm a huge fan of 90s country. Just huge.
Well, I am too, Chris. That's what made it exciting for me as a writer, just trying to keep up or bring something fresh or I just I loved it. I was such a fan of songwriters early on. I've talked about this before with my dad, in the business he had Billboard magazine and I loved looking through it because it had just, everything you wanted in there. It told you who wrote the song and
Hmm.
who produced it. And I loved all that information
It
you
was
could
like the
get.
liner notes on steroids. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was so good. It
Yeah.
would tell you albums and all kind of good stuff. And this was way back, I was a kid in the 70s. So
Yeah.
I found that very interesting, and then I started seeing those same names of songs, whether it was whoever from back in the day. Of course, I was always a fan of Dean Dillon, which came a little bit
Oh
later,
my
but
gosh, yeah.
Dean started popping up on everything, but a lot of writers that preceded him that are some of my favorites from back in the day. But yeah, man, Texas always had a vibe as a playing. There's a lot going on down there, and it certainly hasn't changed. It's only
No.
picked up
Yeah,
over the
I
years.
agree.
It's amazing what's happening down there now with the artist and the audience that supports it. That's the thing where Texas always had it over any place else that I've ever really been. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
There's music, there's sports, there's whatever else you like to do, but music is usually there. Alcohol could run a quick close second maybe, but
Yeah,
you know
exactly right.
they still like to drink and drive in
Yep.
Texas. It's a little scary down there,
Yeah, it
but
is very scary,
God God
especially when you
God
get
bless them.
85-mile-per-hour speed limits in certain
Oh,
spots, man. You
I
know.
mean, some of those honky tonks are out in the middle of nowhere still,
Yeah.
but
I say to my
a
wife
little.
all the time, I'm like, in Massachusetts, this road would be 45. I say up there,
Yeah.
we love our kids more than they do here in Texas, I think.
Oh man. Well, heck, if you've ever been on I-10, there's some wide open spaces
Oh,
out there.
yeah, I have. Yeah, I love it out
Put
there.
the put the hammer down, man. There's
Yep.
just not much.